Well, it is good to be back. For those of you who don't know, I was gone from June 15th to September 15th on renewal leave. So this is my first week back preaching with you all and my second week back entirely. So I missed you all, but it was a really good opportunity to have some time for reflection and renewal of my spirit and my body and just to get a new perspective. So I'm very grateful to the church for having granted me the 3-month leave. And I know that our fall will be full of wonderful surprises. So I wanted to share a little bit with you today about what I did on my summer vacation. I went to a place, I went on a pilgrimage. I went on several, actually. But one of them was a pilgrimage to a place called Rocamadour, which in French means Rock of Saint Amador. And we'll have some pictures. That's where it was. The pilgrimage is an ancient tradition, just about all over the world. It's not Christian, it's not Jewish, it's not Muslim. It's what probably goes back before anyone can remember. And this summer we've been talking about different pathways to faith. Well, a pilgrimage is another pathway to faith, kind of a literal pathway to faith, right? And I think pilgrimage places kind of come in two categories. And one category are places which are discovered or recognized or acknowledged, meaning there's something special in this place that people encounter when they go there. And so when they acknowledge this and recognize this, it becomes a place of pilgrimage. Sometimes it's places like springs or caves or mountaintops become pilgrimage places because people feel something of God there. They talk about it as a thin place, meaning usually the separation between our everyday world and the spiritual world seems really big. We feel very separate from it. But some people say in certain places that separation is very thin, and you can see into the spiritual world, or you can experience something of the spiritual world. So these thin places, and when you think about a spring. Springs are usually the way that people live in a desert get water. If they have rain, it's usually sudden and too much, and it disappears right away. They might have a cistern or two, but basically a spring is a source of life in the desert. And when you think about it, it's just this water coming up from the ground. It's an amazing gift from God, isn't it? A source of life, worthy of saying, this is a special spot. There is something special about God here. I think we also create pilgrimage places. And in our call to worship this morning, I tried to remind you that this is a pilgrimage place. Every Sunday, people come here to meet God, to meet one another, to experience something, to pray, to somehow step out of the everyday world into something special. And it becomes holy because of all the generations of people who have met God here, who hope to meet God here, who have shared their deepest longings, their deepest sorrows with one another and with God. So this place becomes holy. I think that's also something that happens when we read the pilgrimage story of Jesus this morning. Now, there's not a lot of details, so I'm going to interpret. And what I think happened was Jesus is coming along to the age when Jews recognize manhood, right? If there was such a thing as a bar mitzvah at his time, he would be getting ready for it. So he comes to the temple on this age of becoming fully adult. And he has, I think, an awakening or some special experience that brings forth in him this gift that he has. Gift's been there all the time, but something in that pilgrimage, something in that encounter awakens it. And he becomes more fully who God is calling him to be. And so he's able to have this very sophisticated conversation with the leaders at the temple. So for him, the pilgrimage, like it can be for anyone who goes on pilgrimage, can awaken something in us, can bring something that is sleeping in us to full potential. So I set out on a pilgrimage to Rocamadour. I'd heard about this place for a while. And you can see it's not a big place. It has a population now of a little more than 650 people. But it's been a major pilgrimage site since about the year 1000. It goes back farther than that. And the next picture is on the top of the hill. You wouldn't have seen it in the previous picture. It's a little farther away. This is the ruins of where they housed the pilgrims. The town was too small, so they had to have a special place for the pilgrims. And during the 13th century was about when the height of the pilgrimage to Rocamadour happened. 2,000 people a day would come through Rocamadour on pilgrimage. So everybody in town was in the pilgrimage business. They were hotel keepers or restaurant owners or whatever it was to make sure that the pilgrims had a good experience. They are very proud of some of the famous pilgrims that came here. Kings came here, famous church leaders, bishops and popes and things like that would come. The next picture are the steps that lead up to the chapel. And that's the lower village down there. And there's something like 216 steps. And people would sometimes go up on their knees, one step at a time, and say a prayer on every step. And this was showing the seriousness of their intent. Okay, the next picture. When you come up the stairs, you come into this little courtyard. And you can kind of see the people standing in front of a well-like thing. That's where the stairs go down. And on the right, there's a building. And in the next picture, that's the building you're looking at. And that little chapel is the place where pilgrims came. The next picture shows the interior of that chapel. And finally, okay, here's the punchline. This is what they came to worship. This is a statue of Our Lady of Rocamadour. She's not much to look at, is she? When you think of statues of the Virgin or the Madonna, you probably think of, something by Michelangelo where she's beautiful and peaceful and young and innocent and embodies the obedience to God for having this child and the sorrow of what's to come. But mostly they're beautiful and young. This one isn't. And she's not physically beautiful, and she's not even made very beautifully, right? So the legend was that Saint Amador, for whom this town is named, carved her himself. And it's kind of believable because just about anybody could have carved this statue. But what is she saying? What does she say to you that a beautiful, sweet young girl doesn't say? What could be the meaning behind this statue? As you contemplate it, what feelings does it bring up in you? So most of the pilgrimage sites that were popular during the Middle Ages were associated with miracles, miraculous healings or other kinds of things, usually physical healings. And so many miracles are associated with this statue. But I think she says more than that. And she is part of a tradition that is called a Black Madonna or a Black Virgin, carved out of dark wood, intentionally, we think. And I think each person that looks at any image of the divine or something of God will have a different reaction. But one of the things associated with the Black Virgins are that they probably are the survivor of something that goes back before organized religion, before Islam, before Christianity, before Judaism, to something much more ancient, to the old mother goddess of the earth goddess that most religions had, or most people worshipped way, way back before history. You may have seen pictures of the Egyptian goddess Isis, who is always, or almost always, pictured seated on a throne with a baby in her lap. And that's where our pictures of the Madonna come from. Isis was a popular goddess in Egypt and the whole Roman Empire up until the year 300 or 400. So the fact that Christians picked it up and used it and associated it with Mary, it was all happening at the same time in the same part of the world. So this image brings us back, I think, way before our own tradition. So why is it black? Why is she dark? What is that all about? Well, it's about the earth, and anybody who's been a gardener knows the richest soil to plant something to bring life is black. The blacker the better, right? It's fuller of all the things that are needed for growth. The tallest tree has the deepest roots. The roots are black and in the earth. We need that darkness to grow, right? Seeds germinate in the dark. It doesn't make any sense, right? We think plants need light. No, seeds germinate in the dark. And it's kind of a way of talking about our own lives. If nothing bad ever happened, we wouldn't grow. That there's something about the dark that we need, literally and on a symbolic level, to grow. In many cultures, black is the color of life, and white is the color of death. I think Chinese folks, don't they always dress in white at funerals? So we associate the color black with death, but it's probably much more a color of life and creativity. Black is also all colors put together. If you mix all colors together, you get black. White is the absence of color. So in another way, black talks to us about the unity of all things. The unity of all races, the unity of all people, the unity of all creation, people with animals, people with their environment. It is a color of unity. It brings everything together. So this black mother is a powerful symbol. And Christianity and Judaism come along with wonderful, powerful stories about the God who is Father, the God who is Son. But I think people still needed that connection to the mother. And so they start picking up the old images and making Mary into this dark mother. So she is, the sweet, obedient young girl, but she is also this powerful source of life. And Mary also becomes associated with grief, right? She is the one who loses her son in a tragic way. And so she is also the one that people seek in times of consolation when they're needing comfort. And we all know that God is not male, that God is not female, that God is spirit, that God is love. But we use these images of maleness and femaleness to help us connect to God. The Bible uses pretty much male images for God, but not entirely. There are a few female images and other nature images for God. So I think this Madonna is just pointing us towards another pathway to this God who is more than we can imagine, who is bigger than our experience, who is more than we have words for, but yet brings so many of these things together. So I want to read a little story by an artist who does wonderful images of Black Madonnas, and she talks about this connection for her. When I was about 8 years old, my family moved from Arkansas to Chicago, but my mother sent me back to North Little Rock each summer to stay with my grandmother. It is my mother, then, who imprinted the poetry of pilgrimage in my soul. Summer after summer, she sent me back home to her mother. When we drove up Main Street where my grandmother lived, Mima sat on the front porch waiting for us. Still, at some distance, I saw her see me. and sweetly the finding of each other was reenacted on summer nights, hiding and seeking and finding. After supper, as soon as it was dark enough, the children gathered to play the day's final game. Sometimes it was Mima who looked for me and found me, and then lifted me into her arms and put me to bed. When Mima died, my family and I arrived from Chicago to attend her funeral. The little white clapboard house on Main Street was filled with grieving adults. They gathered up my mother, and she disappeared into her family. I had never seen so many people in the living room, and now they were embracing each other and bending over Mima's casket. While the adults comfort each other, many bewildered children, strangely forgotten, wandered around seeking a container for their own loss. We were of no use to each other. I went outside to the dogs, but soon came in. It was cold in mid-December. In a bedroom, I found my father's sister, the only relative of his who had come to the wake. She was a stranger to most of my mother's family, and she was sitting alone in a dark bedroom. I paused in the doorway. "Come here, baby," she called. And I ran into her wide open arms, her embrace, into cloth and comfort, into the dark enclosure of her enormous body, where I could lay down my grief. Through a lifetime of pilgrimages to many Black Madonnas, this memory of Aunt Louise has passed through each of them. Even anticipating each sweet discovery, I still approach these dark altars grieving, and I find there the deepest place to lay that grief down. For over 40 years, I have prayed before the Black Madonnas. Throughout Europe, images of her are enshrined in countless pilgrimage churches, in remote monasteries, in tiny chapels and vast cathedrals, down in dark crypts and up on high altars. Enclosed in these many homes, she has been visited by millions of pilgrims for hundreds of years. She is the touchstone, always pulling us into her mystery. So you might wonder, why did I get connected up with Black Madonnas? This is not my tradition. I have very little connection to Catholic worship. So why would this image, this experience be meaningful to me? Well, it's what I started with at the beginning of the service. When you go to a place like this, when I went to Rocamadour, you feel this incredible sacredness of the place. Perhaps going back to the time when people were living in a cave, standing around a spring, giving thanks for the source of life. But I also feel what generations of people have been feeling here. They have poured out their prayers. They have received healing. They have shared their loss, their grief, their joy, their thanksgiving. Countless tears shed for loved ones. Where God has been sought with passion, sometimes with desperation. Where God has been met and experienced. In these places of pilgrimage, there is a sense of deep transformation. I feel the layers and layers of being human here, of people crying out for God. So it deepens my own experience. I am part of a fellowship who seek God. I'm not alone. I am part of a huge line of tradition, of individuals who have come on this pathway, on this pilgrimage. Pilgrimage can be anywhere. As I said, it can be here every Sunday. It can be to your favorite coffee house where you feel complete for a few moments every morning. It can be around your dinner table with people you love. What makes The difference is our consciousness, our awareness that we are here to meet God in this place with these people or alone, in solitude or in community, either one. But when you open your heart in that special place, God is with you. So I hope you'll take a pilgrimage, maybe this afternoon, to a place where you feel safe and whole. Amen.